Look at this photograph of India in the late 19th century. You are seeing a society caught between two worlds. On one side, the rapidly expanding machinery of the British Empire, bringing global commerce. On the other, a deeply entrenched ancient traditional culture. For centuries, the standard path for a spiritual seeker here was clear: isolation. A monk would abandon a chaotic society and retreat to the forests or mountains to seek enlightenment, far removed from the noise of the streets. Into this landscape stepped Narendranath Dutta. As a student at Scottish Church College, he was steeped in Western philosophers like David Hume and Herbert Spencer. He demanded hard empirical proof for the existence of God. Yet at the exact same time, he possessed an intense drive to experience Indian spiritual traditions firsthand. He rejected the stereotype of the frail, passive ascetic. He was fiercely intelligent and equally committed to intense physical training, boxing, and rowing. He approached his search for truth with explosive energy. Before he could address the cultural divide between the East and the West, he had to reconcile his own internal conflict, the clash between his strict intellectual skepticism and his deep desire for genuine faith. This image shows the Dakshineswar Kali Temple. In 1881, Narendra traveled to this quiet spiritual center on the banks of the Hooghly River. Here, he met Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Ramakrishna was a mystic whose approach to faith was entirely experiential. He didn't offer logical arguments or philosophical proofs. He offered direct, overwhelming spiritual experiences, an approach that confounded Narendra's analytical mind. Over the next 5 years, the two engaged in a constant debate. Narendra tested his mentor, he questioned his visions, and he argued relentlessly. Eventually, he found a resolution. He realized he didn't have to discard his logic to accept faith. He simply had to expand his definition of what constituted truth. In 1886, Ramakrishna passed away. Narendra and a close group of disciples took formal monastic vows. Narendra shaved his head, donned the ochre robes, and adopted a new name, Swami Vivekananda. This transformation grounded his spiritual authority in intellectual rigor, providing the necessary foundation for his mission outside the temple walls. Between 1888 and 1893, Vivekananda traversed the Indian subcontinent entirely on foot. For 5 years, he lived as a wandering monk, relying on alms. We can see the reality of rural India at the time in this photograph. As he moved from village to village, he came face to face with widespread poverty and rigid caste discrimination. This was a stark contrast to the comfortable intellectual environment of his youth. He shattered the traditional model of the isolated monk, declaring that service to humanity is service to God. He pulled these concepts together, arguing that high philosophical ideals must be applied directly to pragmatic demands, like disaster relief, healthcare, and education. By tearing down the walls separating the monastery from the slums, he transformed spirituality from a passive escape into an active mandate to improve society. To enact mass social reform across India, he required financial resources and a global platform that were currently out of his reach. This is the site of the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago. Vivekananda arrived here as a completely unknown monk, stepping into a massive, heavily Western-dominated arena. When it was his turn to speak, he bypassed the standard formal greetings and began with 5 simple words: "Sisters and Brothers of America." Immediately, he framed his audience not as foreign subjects to be lectured, but as equals in a shared human experience. The audience of several thousand people rose in a standing ovation. That speech launched a multi-year tour across the United States and Europe, where he introduced Vedanta and yoga to the West. He spoke to them with absolute intellectual parity. By bridging that massive cultural gap, he established the foundation for universal brotherhood. When he returned to India in 1897, his objective shifted. He began building the permanent infrastructure required to turn his philosophy into tangible social change. This structure is Belur Math, the headquarters of the Ramakrishna Order. He founded the Ramakrishna Mission here, creating a new organizational framework that embedded Eastern spiritual philosophy into a highly efficient Western-style structure. The diagram here illustrates this model. He utilized healthcare, education, and disaster relief to support spiritual development, a structural shift that brought monks out of seclusion and into the service of the public. His physical momentum was cut short. On July 4, 1902, Swami Vivekananda passed away. He was exactly 39 years old. Yet those 39 compressed years sent a shockwave outward. His writings inspired India's national awakening and subsequent youth movements, while his travels permanently embedded yoga into the cultural fabric of the West. He left behind a defining mandate: arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. He proved that true enlightenment is not the endpoint of an isolated journey. It is the continuous, practical pursuit of elevating the people around you.